Hi, I'm Rigger. This is Yura, and today we're entering a new era. Before that though, be sure to like the video if you like it, share anything else would like it, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see more. Now, this may seem like an odd idea, but lately I've been really thinking about the future of our characters. Be it in the immediate future, the end goal, or where people might end up if there were time skips when we were looking into all of that. Whichever way it's done, what's happening with characters when we move through time is interesting. Who will they become? This idea brought me around to Ren. Now, if you're a channel veteran, you know I've been predicting his death since the beginning, literally. But we should never lock ourselves into one path or one idea, and I've been thinking about, particularly in the case of if there was something like a significant time jump and he wasn't dead, what would we do with Ren specifically? Who would Ren become? Or at the end of the story perhaps, once things are settled and Salem has been dealt with and the story is over, if Ren is alive at that point, what is the future of the character? What is the future of all the characters, honestly? That's when it came to me that if we're talking about more secondary characters like Nora, Ren, and Oscar, they fit quite different roles than the others, just in general how they serve the story. They're less important to combats and the like. They still take part in them, and I'm not taking shots at any of them, they're great, but on a narrative level, the focus tends to go elsewhere, especially for big combats and big resolutions, because, well, the others are just more main characters, that's just how it goes. So, since on a narrative level the focus just tends to end up elsewhere, that's one of the reasons I've mentioned the death of Ren more than once. Basically, what is left for his character to do? He can be a huntsman and fight and protect people and just fill that general role. He can develop his relationship with Nora, but it's just a relationship. But in general, what does he have much more to do in the story? What is a big arc for him to go on? He seems to be relatively resolved, and now it's just waiting for things to play out. Which is why I've mentioned his death several times, because while he is currently not really doing much as a character, he's just playing the role of generic person on the team who's fighting and going through his relationship stuff. You could instead be using his death as a very motivational moment to push others, like Nora especially, on a new arc that would fit very well, especially at such an emotional time for them. Basically, without bearing the lead any further, examining Ren as a character, if we're not gonna kill him, if we're not doing that idea, because we've talked about that a lot, thinking it over, I really think he's in the running to end up as either a leader of a country or the headmaster of an academy. Yeah, the leaders aren't one person, they don't have like a president system, they have a governing body, but in that case he'd be among them. But also a headmaster feels really likely too, since that's what we more focus on. Obviously, if we're saying that Salem has been dealt with and the whole story is ended and everything's done, it'll bring into question if the Huntsman Academies are still even needed by that point, or say has the Grim threat in general been somewhat resolved, you know, gods involved, etc. Are they no longer the major threat? Who knows? But in general, if you were to take Ren and accelerate time into the future, what would you see him doing? Maybe being a huntsman to help those in need, but his personal growth lately has been about thinking of himself as a failure, and how he probably shouldn't. He doesn't want to be weak, he wants to do more. And that comes into play when you remember that his greatest lesson, or the big lesson of his youth, was to take action. If you take that line of thinking, and you use his usual calm, restrained approach of just his general character, plus his basically cheating superpower of negotiation through his semblance that allows him incredible insight into anyone, he might be one of the best candidates for a politician or a headmaster among the whole cast. And so, let's go through the whole cast, or well, at least the main ones. We'll go through some options. We'll start with the big four. RWBY is never going to be a politician or a headmaster, it's not really her bag. She wants to save others, she wants to be a hero, she wants to do the right thing. But sitting still and doing it through paperwork and strategy sounds like it's not really in her wheelhouse, just a hunch. Weiss, on the other hand, is a great pick, actually. Weiss is really on that path. My prediction has been for a long time that she would end up as a headmaster. She's studious, she's caring, she's strong, she has a lot of knowledge of dust, she has a lot of knowledge with her semblance. If you were to rebuild Atlas and stick her there to lead, absolutely. If they're into the idea of a Schnee holding power again, which may be a total other issue entirely, and of course that could be a big problem. So, going on to Blake, she does want to change the world, absolutely, and whilst dealing with it through institution might actually make a bigger difference in the world and be more effective, I'm not sure it'd satisfy her usual approach to things. I could be wrong though, Blake is a maybe. And Yang, well, I mean, she's fierce, she's a free spirit, she has a big temper, she's fun-loving, and she's action-orientated. I'm not sure she's the type either. Moving to the side characters though, Oscar, absolutely. Once he grows more, of course. Although having Oz in his head is both an advantage and a disadvantage, depending how things go. I mean, sure, he can absolutely learn a lot, but also if Ozpin basically takes over, or that merge goes through and is permanent, well, he also might be a leader, but that's just because it would be Oz retaking his positions. But Oscar himself is caring, compassionate, passionate, he has a great nature, he has a quickness to learn, he has an understanding of people, and he has sympathy. He's also quite courageous, and he has an upbringing of hard work. It would make him a great choice, legitimately, on his own without Oz. Jean is also actually a good choice, potentially. He wasn't the best at education, but as a leader of people, he was building up quite strong qualities, and he has a great personality towards others, and he is quite caring and he is quite noble. Moving in that direction could be a good idea for him. I don't think it'd be where he'd end up if I was to bet, but I wouldn't rule it out. It could definitely happen. And lastly, from the main crew is Nora. Again, Nora is very caring. She's motivated, she wants to help, she cares about the little people. That's definitely a great quality. I could see her being a teacher, or leading a force for good, or, you know, something along those lines, but I don't know about as a headmaster and leading an academy, some kind of position of top authority. I feel like she'd be better as an enforcer and better as someone who gets her hands dirty and gets in there and actually tries to change things on the ground level. But as a leader of perhaps a group that does that, like a security leader or something, yeah, absolutely, she could do that. I don't really know why my mind drifted to this whole conversation at all, but it's a fun discussion, so we'll keep going. Where this really gets interesting though is when you look at a map. See, if you were to look at a map, if you put Weiss, Winter, or Whitley in Atlas as figureheads to rebuild and lead, or actually, little side theory thing, I really think that could happen. If you want my opinion, you have all three. You have Weiss as the headmaster of the academy, Winter is the general of the military, and Whitley runs the new SDC. That's just kind of perfect and amazing on a story level. They rebuild Atlas from the ground up, and despite their name, they rebuild things the right way and actually use their lessons to pass on what they've learned. But, you know, it would also be a weird Schnee-dominated society in the hierarchy, which is kind of weird if you think about it on a political level, and also, again, the people might reject the Schnees being in control of everything again. But as far as their specialities and their character arcs go, it's pretty perfect, so stick a pin in that as a legitimately possible option, and something I've thought about for a long time, but it's not really enough in there to make a whole video. It's just, yeah, that's where my money is, or that's where I think is a great idea. So on its own, just that. Legitimately part of the endings I've had in mind for the show. But other than that, we either then go to Oscar or Jean to take over as leader in Vale. I mean, it could be either of them who assumes that mantle, but, you know, and this is also talking in the future, obviously. We have Glinda there for now, and they're not in the age range to be taking over as the leader of the academy yet. But we're talking in the future, ending up that sort of way, or if there's a time skip. Anyway, that's two nations covered if we were to start filling roles. So that leaves Vacuo, which is the most up in the air, although we know the least about it, at least in the show, and who might end up there. Though Blake could be a good fit, although I could also see her actually going to lead in Menagerie, you know, trying to save the Faunus and help the Faunus integrate in society from a leadership position there once the world is calmed down, sort of thing. Since it is such a rough place and a place built on strength though, and I know that the academy is already led by someone who loves punching, maybe we put Yang in Vacuo. I'm not against that at all. It sounds kind of cool actually. I mean, her mother has talent at leading bandits, there's no reason that shouldn't be hereditary too. Yang can keep them in line. But also it doesn't have to be this. There's no saying the ending has to be one character takes over their own territory. It's just an idea that you could do to round things out at the end. Each group of characters goes to a place that really represents them, or maybe each character does and they end up leading it for the better with the lessons they've learned along the way. Also, yeah, we'll add in here that I do have a little mini theory that could be a version of this, which is taking Ren out of the equation, but it would be that each of the RWBY girls end up leading a nation. The only thing is that it does get kind of messy though, because it doesn't perfectly fit. You would assume that it would then be Blake who's taking over Mistral, simply because it's the one left over, and there's no reason that Yang would fit them more or Blake fit better in Vacuo. But yes, if you were to say you think that RWBY could end up as leader of a country and you probably put her in Vale as she's like the main character and it's our starting town and her home, then yeah, you could do that. I guess you could say that possibly you put Yang over in Mistral because her mother is on that continent, but I mean, that's not much. But yeah, this 4 academies or 4 headmasters option where the RWBY girls each take one place is an ending I did think about, but with the relationships of them being together, you really don't see it happening, but just thought I'd mention it since we're here. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of these fit pretty nicely. The Schnees go to Atlas, makes sense, and you send the knights and the noble people to Vale, that also works. But then you get Ren in Mistral, and that's also really fitting for him. That's the one left over, and I would send Ren there. Yes, it's his homeland, so that helps a lot. But it fits more thinking about who he really is, and it feels like the type of person Mistral would benefit from. Mistral is the cultural hub of Remnant, a big contributor to art, fashion, culture, and someone calm, in touch with their emotions and introspective is a perfect option to lead a place like that. But more than that, you also have Mistral's wide range of culture, and someone like Ren will hold respect for many of the different values people see in their different homes. Not to mention, you also have Ren's perspective of someone who at one point was at least among the privileged in his hometown, and has experienced the pain of loss and struggle, but also the pain of poverty and survival and looking after others. That makes him a fantastic candidate with dealing with such a wide range of people in such a big land, especially if we're considering that Nora would also be by his side, hopefully. So she could be in another official role, and then there's sympathy to the plights of others who are going through things like them, and their drive to help those people would make them excellent candidates for this position. Again, you have someone like Nora who really cares about the disenfranchised. You have her there in a role to help crack down on the shadier elements of Mistral and uproot some of the more ingrained issues in its society and its underbelly. Again, it helps that Ren is a living cheat code to any and all negotiations. With his semblance, he'd be able to easily weed out liars, make deals to help the people with the right people, and give fair and rational ruling on issues between others. With Nora as the offense and Ren as the figurehead and the even-minded one, if you want my pick to usher in the next age of culture on Remnant, it'd be those two in Mistral. But I could also understand that you might say this feels a little pointless to talk about, it's such a what if. Or perhaps it may seem like just an idea for an AU script. But also, I thought this could be interesting if we look at this through the lens of if it were to happen, say, during something like a time skip. If the gang were to return to Remnant and many years have passed. Now, we do have the issue that they'd still be combating Salem, and things would be falling apart, and things like culture and art and so forth aren't really the highest priority right now. Plus, we need every able-bodied huntsman on their toes and keeping people safe and killing Grimm, so that's them. But in that case, I was looking at it, let's say a few years have passed, and they're not, leading a whole country. It's not a huge amount of time, but things have still changed. Let's say something like Salem has attacked Vacuo, or something else happened that caused the need for leadership to surface among the people. Especially among, let's say, the refugees. This could be a good way to explore this, or start exploring it. Yes, we have Winter, who is older and in a leadership position, but you can't run the general public like an army all the time. Nora certainly cares for them all and will fight for them, but if we need a leader among them, someone to talk to the people, sort of speak for the huntsmen who are protecting them, and they look to someone to make decisions, I really think you could start giving this role to Ren. It would be a very interesting choice. Because Oscar's too young, no matter what you say. Like, we know how intelligent he is, and we like him as a main character, but you put him up there in front of all the adults and say, this is the guy we're listening to, they probably won't listen. And also, we run into a secondary issue where the Elysian people, or more specifically the big bulk of Mantle people in this group, may not respond well to another Schnee giving them orders, no matter that it's a different Schnee. They just might not like that. They have very bad thoughts right now about both the Schnees and the military, and Winter is both. So that's a real issue, especially considering what just happened. And don't think I'm overlooking Nora, especially them as a pair as well, and especially after all these feelings of all of this hit them fully about their friends being all dead and gone. But while Nora is a great weapon for the people and is also a great person to represent their voice and be a voice for them, also keeping tabs on the mood of what's going on and staying tapped into the general concerns of the population, it really feels like it could be a good opportunity to start giving Ren a new role as a leader and decision maker, a new journey, a new possible future for the character that'll add some much needed aspects to him in these later seasons where he seems to already have finished his arcs. Keep everyone moving forward. And it especially works if you want to use it as a comparison point to his more recent breakdown and arguments from Volume 8, where he was so against the decisions that they'd been forced to make. Things had gone wrong and feeling like they weren't qualified to make those decisions and they don't know what they're doing. If you turn that on its head, and it forces Ren into a position of having to make decisions for the people, shoulder that burden willingly, have to make decisions with their lives in his hands, it's a really complex idea for his character, that he still feels he isn't qualified, and he doesn't always know what's best, and he has to basically make a guess or an educated decision, and again, people's lives are in his hands. This whole group, his decision could get them killed or keep them alive, not just as a huntsman protecting them, but as a leader guiding them. That would especially be the angle I'd take if the refugees refugees or more of the population have to leave Vacuo for whatever reason. Because in that sort of instance, I wouldn't be looking at people who are already in positions of power in Vacuo, like Headmaster Theodore, because they'd be dealing with their own people. So this refugee group falls under there to guide and possibly take away from Vacuo. I don't know how they'd be crossing continents or anything, but say after the destruction of Vacuo, the people are splintered. Vacuo is destroyed. Teachers from Shade and the others were with one group who are mostly the residents there, and our group are with the Atlesian refugees who are in like a little camp, or something of that nature, because they can't be fully integrated into Vacuo yet because there just isn't enough room. The place gets destroyed, the people get splintered, the groups get formed, so those who are more experienced at being leaders who are already in Vacuo have to deal with their people, and they're far away from our group. So then the ideas are, well, we need to take the refugees somewhere else that's safe, and the places that come to mind are Vale or Mistral. They still exist, at least. They're still built. I don't really think this is something we would cover in the show, if I'm honest. I don't think taking the refugees on foot overseas and through all these places with Ren making decisions and leading is something we would see in the course of the show, because it just doesn't really fit the pacing, even though it would be cool to see. But the evolution of Ren along that journey could be really interesting. From being protectors to true leaders, it'd be an awesome transformation. But just because you can't do all that on screen doesn't mean you can't do it, because again, if we do have a time jump situation, that's where it could be. People might be mad we haven't seen Vacuo, but maybe they just keep it as it's a thing in the books and don't worry about it. I don't know. I don't plan to know their strategy. I wouldn't have revealed a place you haven't been to before you get there, but it's a personal decision. But yeah, if there is a time jump and the RWBY girls and Jean come back to everything being very changed in the world, and especially Ren is now leading a large community where they've had to splinter off and they've done this journey, and we find Ren as the leader of this group of people and his refugees now, and it's been that way for a year or so or some more, and they're just attempting to survive, perhaps looking more like his father at this point too. Not necessarily that much age, doesn't have to be that long, but how he carries himself, how he speaks, and how he acts. That'd be quite a wild and unexpected thing to return to that equally wouldn't feel out of place if you saw that. If you saw the group of refugees in Vale, let's say, or Mistral, and you find Ren there as sort of their leader in sort of a position of power in like a, a hall or something, not, leading the whole country, but just being the voice of this group of people who make decisions for them and help them get to where they are. With Nora by his side, and Oscar by his side, and whoever else is tagged along, and Winter there to protect everyone with her powers, you would still believe it. That seems like something that could happen. So I just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up, an interesting idea. It's just cool food for thought, so there you go. Anyway, that's all for now. But remember, true art comes from the soul. So if you want a real life semblance, you just gotta make something. Until next time, my name is Rigo. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope I did alright.